Welcome back, everyone. Let's now take some time to talk about while loops. While loops will continue to execute a block of code while some condition remains true. So for example, if we try to relate this to a sort of real life scenario, while my pool is not full, maybe I want my program to keep filling my pool with water. Or if I'm designing a robot with some code, while my dogs are still hungry, keep feeding my dogs. So let's explore the syntax of a while loop. It's actually quite simple. We're going to say while and then some sort of Boolean condition. So we'll usually have some sort of comparison operation check, and a lot of times it's going to be while some variable is true or is equals true, then colon, and then a block of code. And that block of code, in this case represented by do something, is going to continue to execute while the condition is true. Now we can also combine a with statement with an else statement if we want. So I can say while some Boolean condition is true, do something else, meaning once that condition is no longer true, or since the beginning it was no longer true, we do something different. Let's explore these concepts with some examples. Let's hop to a Jupyter Notebook. All right, so let's start off by building out a very basic while loop. I'm going to create a variable, say x is equal to 0, and then say while x is less than, let's actually say less than 5, so we don't have a whole lot of printing. We're going to print the current value of x. So we'll say print the current value of x. Lots of different ways we can do this. We'll just do it quickly with an f-string literal. The current value of x is, and then inside curly braces we'll pass an x. Now let's imagine what's going to happen here. Don't run this cell yet. We'll say x is equal to 0. While x is less than 5, I'm going to print out the current value of x. So if I were just to run this, basically I would say the current value of x is 0. And that would happen over and over and over again because x isn't changing. So let's update x during this while loop. We'll say x is equal to x plus 1. So now let's run this and see what happens. I get back the current value of x is 0, then 1, then 2, then 3, then 4. And on that last one, when it's equal to 4, we then say, okay, x is going to be equal to 4 plus 1, which makes x equal to 5, and 5 is not less than 5, it's equal to it. So then the while loop stops running because it's only going to run while this condition is true. Now, if you accidentally have some sort of condition that never becomes false, maybe you forgot this last line of code here and it just ran over and over and over again. So what happens is you get an infinite while loop, and it's a common mistake for beginners to make. I know I've made it myself a bunch of times when I was learning Python. What happens in the Jupyter Notebook is you get a little star here indicating that the cell is still continually running. In order to kind of reset things, just come over here to kernel and either hit interrupt, and if that doesn't work, then hit restart and restart your kernel. Sometimes interrupt won't work because basically the command to interrupt won't get there because Python's using all your computing to kind of continue this while loop. So keep that in mind. If you ever get an infinite while loop, just come over here to kernel and then hit restart, and you'll have to redefine some cells again, but that's the basics of avoiding that error. Okay, so we have the while loop by itself, and as a quick note, this statement of x is equal to x plus 1, we can also write that in the following manner. We can say x plus equals 1. So this line and this line are the same thing. This is just a more compact way of writing it. So if you're ever reading someone else's code and they wrote this instead, that's kind of a sleeker way of writing that same code. Let me run this again. We can say now in2, and we get back the same values. Let's attach an else statement to this while loop. So we can say else colon, and I'm going to print x is not less than 5. And now when we run this, let's see what happens. We get the current values, so all those other print statements, and then I see x is not less than 5. So once this while condition is not true, because this else is lined up with it, we went ahead and printed x is not less than 5. Now as a quick note, if right off the bat x was greater than 5, so let's make x is equal to 50, and I run this, then this while loop never executes because this condition is never true, and then we have the else condition execute anyways. That doesn't mean I need it, so if I didn't have that there and I ran this, just nothing would happen because this isn't true. Alright, finally I want to introduce 3 keywords that are really useful with loops. You're not going to be using them all the time, but sometimes you'll need their use cases, and that's the break keyword, the continue keyword, and the pass keyword. Break is going to break out of the current closest enclosing loop. Continue goes to the top of the closest enclosing loop, and then pass does nothing at all. So let's start a little bit backwards here. Let's go with pass, and we can show this actually with a for loop. might be a little simpler here. We're going to say for, let's make a quick list. We'll say x is equal to 1, 2, 3, and then say for item in x colon. And let's say we didn't quite know yet what we wanted to do here. We essentially want some filler. If I just have a comment here and I try running this, so when you attempt to run this, you actually get an error. It says syntax error, unexpected, end of file while parsing. And what that means is Python, because it uses indentation and white space as a crucial part of its code, it expects you to basically have something here. Even a comment isn't enough to fill it. So often what you can do is have the pass keyword, and the pass just says do nothing at all. And a lot of times programmers keep it as a placeholder to kind of avoid a syntax error. Because you can imagine if I'm writing a larger piece of code and I know eventually I want to come up and fill out this for loop, but right now I don't want to deal with it. Let's say I wanted to print end of my script over here. Now when I run this, I don't get that syntax error and I'm still able to print out my script. If I just have the comment, I get an error because it's expecting something to happen after this colon. So in order to avoid that, you can use the pass keyword. And you're going to see the pass keyword used a lot when we start building out functions and methods ourselves, because often when you're programming, you'll create a little holder for a function, but you don't want to test it right away. So you use the pass keyword as something to put in place there, so you avoid syntax errors, and you're also safe because you know pass doesn't do anything. It just says, well, I'll pass this, and I'm not going to do anything. All right, so that's the pass keyword. It does nothing at all. Continue goes to the top of the closest enclosing loop. So let's show you an example of that. And we'll actually use for loops again for this. We're going to say my string is equal to Sammy. So let's have that there. And we'll say for letter in my string, print out the letter. So here we see Sammy printed out. Now what I'm going to do is, let's imagine that I actually didn't want to print the letter A for whatever reason. I could do the following. If the letter is equal to lowercase a colon continue. And now when I run this, I'm not actually printing out the letter A. So what's happening here? Well, continue basically tells this program to go back to the top of the closest enclosing loop. So here's continue, and we have a loop up here for letter in my string. So if that letter is equal to A, we continue, meaning go back to the top of the closest enclosing loop. Note that we are specifically saying loop, we're not saying some sort of statement here. So that's where semantics can come into play, but what this is saying is if the letter is A, go ahead and continue and go back to the loop. So that's how you can use the continue statement. If you're a beginner in Python programming, it's definitely not something that comes up a lot in your beginning code. It's going to happen that more naturally you'll start using it much later on. So be aware of it, but don't worry about use cases right now. You won't really be using it that often. And then finally, break breaks out of the current closest enclosing loop. So let's see what happens if we replace continue here with break instead. Now when we run this, what happens is instead of going back to the top of the closest enclosing loop, it breaks out of the current closest enclosing loop, meaning it just breaks this loop and stops this loop if that letter is equal to A. So that's actually really useful, especially with while statements. So let's see an example of using break with a while statement. Let me zoom in here just so we can see this clearly. I'm going to do the same thing as before. We'll say x is equal to 5, and then we'll say while, actually let's make it equal to 0 here, just as we did before. While x is less than 5, print out x, and then we'll say x is equal to x plus 1. So when we run that, as expected, I get 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. But let's imagine I wanted to break this while loop if x was ever 2. Then I could do the same thing here. I say if x is equal to 2, at any moment, go ahead and break out of this while loop. Now when we run this, we only get back 0 and 1. Okay, so that's the basics of this break, continue, and pass keyword. So what we covered in this lecture was the while loop. So while some condition is true, execute this block of code. Be careful here because if you accidentally say while and this condition is constantly true, you may have to restart your kernel. If you're running a Python script and you end up getting that error that the while loop is just never closing, you should try Control-C. That typically interrupts. So you can even see here, interrupt, it says Control-C to go to the kernel. All right, then we have the break, continue, and pass keywords. Again, not going to be using these right off the bat, especially things like continue, but we'll probably be using break a little more, and then once we get used to functions, we'll be using pass a little more, and then much later on we'll be using continue. But you should be aware of these keywords now that you understand both for loops and while loops. Okay, thanks everyone, and I'll see you at the next lecture.